you notice what happens? Bob Marley, he has to go out, he has to leave the island in order to be recognized, right, as a true icon. And what's happening here is that our best ganja farmers, traditional farmers, have been co-opted by, other companies in other jurisdictions.
Speaking with Maurice Ellis, the Vice President of the Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Ellis. What exactly do you do?
Well, I'm really just a glorified farmer, but my focus is agro-processing, right? And we focus on strain stability, development, germplasm, concentrates, and value-added products. I'm also a member of the GLCA, which is the Jamaica Licensed Cannabis Association, right? And as I mentioned, I'm Vice President of Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been in the industry? Been a farmer, a glorified farmer?
Since 2014, I entered this space when I realized the clarion call for practitioners in the ganja space. So since 2014, I have spent a lot of time focusing on research and development, because we need to know exactly what we have before we actually put it out there for consumption.
Right. So you'll be able to see the transformation of the regulated industry, cannabis industry in Jamaica, because we know that the Dangerous Drugs Act was amended in 2015 to decriminalize it and to create a regulatory framework for cannabis in terms of its medicinal, therapeutic, and scientific purposes and so on. So 9 years from then, what's your assessment of how the industry is doing?
Okay, so 2014, at the time, the Future Ganja Growers and Producers Association,
I remember that, yeah.
Right? I came to a symposium. First symposium was held at the University of the West Indies library. And then on the second day, we went to the PCJ building, where we discussed all the issues surrounding ganja, from the human rights issues, come straight down to commercial viability of it. At the time, they were calling it the green gold rush. Now, at that time, there was also a call to create a regulatory system. And that was birthed primarily out of the NCST, the National Commission on Science and Technology, with a steering committee of the NNI, which is the National Nutraceutical Industry, which was chaired by Professor Errol Morrison at the time. And there was a group of us in the steering committee that spanned different agencies: Planning Institute of Jamaica, JAMPRO, Scientific Research Council, all the well thinkers and bright minds, as well as, grassroots, right, in order to get a comprehensive feel, right? And with that, we managed to create what is now known. We create the basis of what is now known as a CLA, right, with the hopes of being able to have practitioners or farmers being able to participate in a regulatory industry, right? I'd rather create an industry, right, for ourselves and build on brand Jamaica. Now, since then, we've created, with the CLA,
the Cannabis Licensing Authority, which came into effect
in 2015.
With the amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act.
That's right. We also work with the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Health, Ministry of National Security, because what we found at the time and still today is that Ganja transcends across all ministries. So we had an interministerial sort of working, which was difficult, right? But we managed to get it done, right? The other thing that we had managed to do was to create standards, right? There were no standards that would apply for cannabis. There were no standards body, right? So we created another committee at the BSJ, Bureau of Standards of Jamaica, and we managed to create standards for cannabis, and those standards have been adopted by ASTM, right, which is an international standards body, right? So Little Jamaica, the work that we did here, right, we have managed to also impact on a global scale as it relates to standards for cultivation, right, which speaks to GAP, good agricultural practices, as well as GMP, good manufacturing practices, right?
So what has been the experience of the members of the Ganja Growers and Producers Association? I mean, the standards are in place, regulatory bodies in place. Are things functioning as expected? Is there a boom? Is there enthusiasm and a green gold rush 9 years later?
Well, I tell you, 9 years later, the challenges that we had in the beginning are some of the same challenges that we have today.
What are those?
Oh, myriads of challenges. Even though some of these challenges may not apply to the regulatory body, we still have the challenge of banking, right? Commercial banks not accepting deposits for the cannabis licensees. Right?
And that is linked to what? Their correspondent banking relationships.
That's right.
The association of the industry to money laundering and the fears and concerns about that.
Precisely.
US regulatory.
Precisely. So you have the INCB, which is the International Narcotics Control Board, that monitors the production of cannabis globally. Now, the CLA, from what I understand, is supposed to provide reports in order to keep in tandem with that body. Okay? Now, the thing now is that we have so many different aspects and groups involved in the ganja space. So you have the sacramental aspect, right? You have the commercial aspect, you have the research and development, right? Now, our primary focus was to include all the practitioners.
Right? Meaning the association?
The association, GGPAJ, right? Whether it be Rastafarians, Ballad, anybody, right, who is well thinking, right, and wants to develop the industry, right, would become a member of the GGPAJ, and then we would assist them, right, in developing whatever it is that they wanted to do, right, in their area of interest. Now, we found that to be challenging because we've set up an alternative development program and made suggestions repeatedly, right? Had meetings for years to say, okay, let us build out this program, right? To include all the traditional farmers, right? To get them involved, right? So that they can finally, right, benefit from this green gold, right? As well as brand Jamaica. But to date, we still haven't heard or seen where the alternative development program has been implemented. There was an attempt in the early days to do that, but I have no idea what happened to that.
And given the very long history of ganja production, and use outside of any regulatory framework, I imagine the number of traditional farmers must be very significant across the country, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Any idea as to what that size is like?
Well, I can't give you a definitive number, but the GGPAJ at one point in time
Yes.
had over 3,000 members dedicated to cultivating and producing ganja and ganja products
Yes.
that would meet good agricultural practices, GAP.
And most of these members were traditional farmers?
They were traditional farmers. In fact, these were the men and women who have been marginalized over the years.
I ran ahead of myself a bit because I meant to ask you, what is the understanding of a traditional ganja farmer? Who is that?
The traditional ganja farmer is a man that has always, or woman, who has been planting ganja for decades, right? The traditional ganja farmer is the man or the woman that has been beaten, locked up by the authorities, right? Some of them aren't here with us today, right? Because some of them have lost their lives for just having a spliff, right? So the thing about it is that the GGPAJ has a more wholesome look at the industry to really develop the industry for those persons who has given Jamaica that brand name, right? The world knows Jamaica for reggae music. The world knows Jamaica for ganja, right? There is a brand name, right? And if you look at it right now, our best musicians that you see out there, right? You notice what happens? Bob Marley, he has to go out, he has to leave the island in order to be recognized, right? As a true icon. And what's happening here is that our best ganja farmers, traditional farmers, have been co-opted by, other companies in other jurisdictions. Right?
How do you mean? How does that work?
So, in 2015, there was a High Times Cannabis Cup,
Okay.
right? Which had a fusion of North American cannabis lifestyle as well as local cannabis lifestyle, and they had a competition where they would have selected and highlighted the best ganja farmers on the island in that competition. And some of those farmers, or most of those farmers, are traditional farmers. Now, the fact that they've gotten the limelight, right? Most of those companies, what they did is offer them contracts abroad to go to California, Colorado, Canada, right? For better opportunities, right? And better recognition, right? For the work that they have done, right? So here it is, we have our skill set and technical expertise in ganja being exported, right?
Isn't that a good thing?
It's a good thing in one aspect, but in another aspect, you find that we're losing our best farmers, right?
You pointed to the banking issues which persist. How have current players in this sector been able to deal with this? Because there are players, there are licenses being issued. How are they able to navigate this difficulty? Clearly is a cash-heavy, cash-centered, concentrated industry then.
It's been very challenging. Having to deal with cash all the time, especially in a innovative technology world, right? Where you need to be able to transfer funds, right? Or deposit funds and secure them, right? Having cash is dangerous, right? And even though the Cannabis Licensing Authority collects for license fees, right? we don't pay in cash, right? We don't pay in cash, and we don't do bank transfers as it relates to the Cannabis Licensing Authority, right?
So how is it?
How the payments are made through managers' checks, things like that, right? The thing is, until the federal government,
The
United States addresses the issue and remove cannabis from being a Schedule 1, we'll always have this problem.
So there's hardly anything you're saying the Jamaican authorities can do. But in terms of the other challenges, so you spoke about the difficulties in getting the traditional farmers being regularized, being part of the formal system. What other kinds of challenges are being experienced still?
So what we've been suggesting is a moratorium or an amnesty.
For whom?
For the traditional farmers.
Okay.
Right? In order to get regularized, to give them enough time, right, to prepare themselves to meet some of these requirements that the licensing authority has, right? Because to this day, it's still hard, difficult to meet those requirements. 8-foot high fence or the height of the fence that they need. When you look at traditional farmers, I've seen a lot of traditional fields that are, when you look at the boundary that they're growing, it's just, a hedge fence or fence posts, and nobody is troubling their crops, right? They don't have security cameras, right? Because really and truly, it's just the skill sets of the farmer that produce good quality material. It's not the unnecessary requirements that does that, right? When you understand the physiology of ganja, and I do understand that there is a process that the regulatory body has to go through for, monitoring, right, and enforcement, right, and that's a very strong word, enforcement, right. However, right, our traditional farmers are not able to meet most of the requirements that the regulatory body has. And we've looked at the alternative development program in order to, as I had mentioned, bring in the small farmer, right, with what they already have, and say, okay, all right, this is the space that they're operating in, right? We can put in or institute a bit of remote monitoring, GIS, geographical indication, GPS locations to say, okay, John Tom is right here, Mary Jane is over here, right? We know that they're cultivating there, right? Let's get them registered, right? Let's take time and get them registered and look at a system of more of a registry, more than, say, this sort of stringent licensing process, right?